Go away, Dad. You're embarrassing me. My name is Mike Torres, and my daughter just said those words to me at her $340,000 wedding. I'm standing outside Connecticut's most exclusive venue in my 15-year-old suit, surrounded by Bentleys and millionaires. Sarah's marrying into old money, and apparently a Mexican construction worker doesn't fit their image. She's been telling them I abandoned the family, that I'm dead to her. What she doesn't know, I own this place. What she's about to learn. You don't humiliate the man who built your foundation. In the next 20 minutes, my daughter's perfect wedding is going to become a very expensive lesson about respect. 250 elite guests are about to witness what happens when you bite the hand that paid for your Columbia education. If you're watching this, hit subscribe and tell me where you're from. You won't want to miss how this ends. This is the story of how I reminded my daughter that dignity isn't inherited, it's earned. Let me paint you the picture of just how out of place I looked that day. I'd driven my 2008 Ford F-150 to Harborview Estate, $12,000 worth of rust spots and concrete mixer in the back. The valet looked at me like I'd made a wrong turn. Behind me, a line of vehicles that cost more than most people's houses. A Bentley Continental GT worth $230,000, a Maserati Quattroporte at $180,000. My truck looked like a workhorse at a thoroughbred show. I was wearing the only suit I owned. Navy blue from JCPenney, bought 15 years ago for $89 when Sarah graduated high school. The cuffs were worn thin, the shoulders a little tight. Under my fingernails, no matter how hard I scrubbed, traces of concrete dust remained. The other men wore custom Italian tuxedos and $100 manicures. The first sign I wasn't welcome came from Mrs. Preston, Sarah's future mother-in-law. She looked me up and down like she was inspecting a health code violation. "Excuse me," she said. "Are you with the catering staff?" "No, ma'am. I'm Sarah's father." Her face went through a series of expressions that would have been funny if they weren't so insulting. Shock, confusion, then something that looked like she'd tasted spoiled milk. "Oh," she said, and walked away without another word. The second sign came from the venue staff itself. A young woman with a clipboard and a headset approached me. "Sir, the service entrance is around back. Chef Rodriguez is expecting his team by 2 o'clock. "I'm not catering," I said. "I'm here for the Torres Preston wedding." She looked at her list, looked at me, looked at her list again. "I'm sorry, I don't see a Miguel Torres on the guest list." Mike Torres, father of the bride. The confusion on her face told me everything I needed to know. Sarah had told these people I wouldn't be coming. Maybe she'd told them I didn't exist at all. But here's what none of them knew. Not Mrs. Preston with her inherited money, not the staff with their clipboards, not even my own daughter. Those 15 years I'd spent working 3 jobs after my wife died, I wasn't just keeping food on the table. I was building something. While Sarah was at Columbia University, 4 years that cost me $280,000 in tuition, room, and board, I was expanding Torres & Associates construction. Every month, $4,200 went from my business account to that university. $4,200 for 4 years straight. Sarah graduated summa cum laude. She got a job at an investment firm in Manhattan, started making more money in a year than I made in 3. And somewhere along the way, she decided that Mike Torres, the man who worked 16-hour days to pay for her education, was an embarrassment. 8 months ago, when she got engaged to David Preston III, she started changing her story. Suddenly, I wasn't the father who sacrificed everything for her future. I was the father who abandoned the family. She told the Prestons I was an unreliable alcoholic who disappeared after her mother died. She said she raised herself on scholarships and student loans, but I kept the bank statements. Every single one. $4,200 a month for 48 months straight. Direct payments to Columbia University. No scholarships. No loans. Just a concrete contractor who loved his daughter more than his own comfort. Standing there in my old suit, watching these people look through me like I was invisible. I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not anger, not hurt. Something colder. Something that had been building for 8 months of unreturned phone calls and canceled Sunday dinners. I felt the urge to remind everyone exactly who they were dealing with. You need to understand what led to that moment outside Harborview Estate. This wasn't just about a wedding invitation. This was about 8 months of watching my daughter erase me from her life. It started in March, when Sarah called to tell me about her engagement. "Dad, I'm getting married," she said. "His name is David Preston III." I was happy for her, proud. This was my little girl, the one I'd read bedtime stories to every night after her mother died, the one I'd helped with calculus homework at the kitchen table while concrete dust settled on everything we owned. "That's wonderful, mija," I said. "When do I get to meet him?" There was a pause, a long one. "Dad, the thing is, David's family is very traditional, very established. They might not understand our background." Our background, like being Mexican American was something shameful, like working with your hands was a disease. "What are you saying, Sarah?" "I'm saying maybe we should take things slow. Maybe you don't need to meet them right away." That should have been my first warning, but I loved my daughter. I trusted her. I figured she was just nervous about blending two different worlds. Over the next few months, the distance grew. Sunday dinners became "I'm too busy." Phone calls became text messages. Text messages became silence. In June, she needed money. "Emergency," she said. "Car broke down and I'm between paychecks." $12,000 she asked for. I sent $15,000 because that's what fathers do. In July, I found out through Facebook that she was having an engagement party. 200 people. I wasn't invited. When I called her about it, she had excuses ready. "Dad, it was mostly David's family and friends. You wouldn't have known anyone." "I know you," I said. "It's complicated." That word. Complicated. Like 28 years of being her father was some kind of mathematical equation she couldn't solve. In August, I ran into Miss Rodriguez from our old neighborhood. Her daughter had gone to high school with Sarah. "Congratulations on Sarah's engagement," she said, "though I have to say I was surprised to hear about her father." "What about her father?" "Well, that he passed away when she was young. Such a tragedy. She's so brave, raising herself like that." I stood there in the grocery store parking lot, holding a bag of groceries, feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach. My daughter was telling people I was dead. Not absent, not estranged, dead. That night, I called her. No answer. I texted her. Nothing. I drove to her apartment in Manhattan. The doorman said she wasn't taking visitors. For 3 weeks, I tried to reach her. Finally, she called back. "Dad, I can explain." "You told people I was dead, Sarah." "I didn't. I just... It's easier than explaining the whole situation." The whole situation. 28 years of loving her was a situation. What situation? I raised you. I paid for everything. I never missed a birthday, never missed a school play, never missed anything that mattered to you. "Dad, you don't understand what it's like for me now. David's family, they have expectations. Standards. Standards. Like honesty wasn't one of them." "So what happens at the wedding?" I asked. "Am I dead for that too?" Another long pause. "The wedding is going to be very formal, very traditional. Maybe it would be better if..." "If what?" "If you didn't come." Those words hit me like a sledgehammer. My own daughter, uninviting me from her wedding. "Sarah, I walked you down the aisle at your quinceañera. I taught you to drive. I sat up all night when you had pneumonia. And you don't want me at your wedding?" "Dad, please don't make this harder than it has to be." But here's what Sarah didn't understand. Here's what she'd forgotten in her rush to join high society and erase her past. If I didn't show up to that wedding, I wouldn't just be losing a daughter. I'd be losing myself. 28 years of being a father doesn't just disappear, because it's inconvenient for someone's social climbing. More than that, I'd be abandoning the memory of her mother, Maria Torres, who died of cancer when Sarah was 15, who made me promise with her last breath that I'd never stop fighting for our daughter. "Take care of our girl," she whispered in that hospital room. "Don't let the world make her forget who she is." Standing outside Harborview Estate that day, watching my daughter choose strangers over family, I realized something. I wasn't just fighting for my relationship with Sarah. I was fighting for the truth. And sometimes the truth needs witnesses. When Sarah saw me walking toward the entrance, her face went white. She rushed over, her $18,000 dress rustling against the marble steps. Behind her, David Preston III followed, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Dad, what are you doing here?" "I'm here for your wedding." "We talked about this." "No, you talked. I listened. Today, I'm here." David stepped forward. 28 years old, trust fund baby, probably never worked a day in his life. He had that soft look rich kids get when they've never faced real consequences. "Sir," he said, "perhaps there's been a misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding," I said. "I'm the father of the bride." Sarah's eyes darted around, checking who was watching. About 50 guests had gathered near the entrance, and more were arriving every minute. Senators, hedge fund managers, people whose names you see on hospital wings and museum plaques. "Dad, please," she whispered. "Can we talk privately?" "Why? Ashamed of something?" "It's not that simple." "Seems simple to me. I'm your father. This is your wedding. I'm here." Preston appeared behind Sarah like a storm cloud. Eleanor Preston, 62 years old, inherited wealth going back 4 generations. She looked at me the way you'd look at a stain on expensive fabric. "Mr. Torres," she said, "I think there's been some confusion." "No confusion. You see, the venue has very strict security protocols. Very exclusive. I'm afraid your name isn't on the approved list." That's when Sarah delivered the blow that changed everything. "Dad, you need to leave. You're embarrassing me." The words hung in the air like smoke. Around us, conversations stopped. People turned to stare. I could feel their eyes, their judgment, their curiosity. "Embarrassing you?" "Look around, Dad. Look at where we are. Look at these people." I looked. Bentleys and Maseratis lined the circular drive. Men in tuxedos that cost more than my monthly mortgage. Women dripping with jewelry that could fund a small country. I see them. These are important people, powerful people. They have standards. Standards. Yes, standards. And standing here in that old suit, smelling like concrete dust, talking with that accent. This accent? "Dad, please, just go. This isn't your world." Mrs. Preston nodded approvingly. "Perhaps it would be best for everyone if you respected Sarah's wishes." David shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, I'm sure you understand. This is a very important day for our families." Our families. Like I wasn't family anymore. That's when I felt it. That cold, calm feeling I get when someone crosses a line they can't uncross. The same feeling I had when a building inspector tried to shake me down for permits 15 years ago. The same feeling I had when a competitor tried to steal my biggest contract. "Sarah," I said, my voice quiet and steady, "let me ask you something. Who paid for Columbia?" "Dad, don't—" 4 years, $280,000. Who paid?" Her face flushed. "We're not doing this here." "You said you raised yourself on scholarships. That's what you told them, right?" Mrs. Preston's eyes narrowed. "Sarah, what is he talking about?" "He's exaggerating," Sarah said quickly. "There were some contributions, but—" "Bank statements don't exaggerate," I said. $4,200 a month. 48 months straight. No scholarships, no loans. Just a construction worker who loved his daughter. The crowd around us was growing. Word was spreading through the venue. People were pulling out phones. David looked confused. "Sarah, you told us your father abandoned the family." "He did, essentially. I worked 3 jobs," I said. "While you were studying for finals, I was pouring concrete at midnight. While you were at sorority parties, I was fixing foundation cracks on weekends. Every dollar you spent at that university came from these hands." I held up my hands, calloused, scarred, stained with years of honest work. Mrs. Preston's voice was ice cold. "Mr. Torres, you're causing a scene." "Am I?" "Yes, and I'm going to have to ask security to escort you off the property." That's when I smiled. Not a happy smile, not a friendly smile. The kind of smile that appears when someone has just made a very expensive mistake. "Mrs. Preston," I said, "before you call security, let me ask you a question. Do you know who owns this venue?" "Of course, the Harborview Estate Company." "And do you know who holds the majority stake in that company?" Her confidence flickered for just a moment. "The Patterson family, obviously." 40%, I said. "Torres and Associates Construction owns 40% of this property. Has since 2019. The silence was deafening. You could hear the wind in the trees, the distant sound of traffic on the highway, the whispered conversations of 250 people trying to process what they'd just heard. Sarah stared at me like I'd just spoken in a foreign language. "That's impossible," she whispered. "A lot of things seem impossible," I said, "until you see the paperwork." The look on Sarah's face told me she was starting to understand that her father wasn't quite the simple construction worker she'd painted to her new family. Dad, what are you talking about? Before I could answer, a familiar voice called out from behind the crowd. Mr. Torres! Sir, I didn't know you were coming today. I turned to see Carlos Mendez walking toward us. 35 years old, sharp black suit, manager's badge clipped to his lapel. 15 years ago, Carlos was my apprentice. Barely spoke English, mixed concrete for $8 an hour. Today, he's the vice president of operations for Harborview Estate. Carlos, I said, good to see you. He approached with a big smile, then noticed the tension in the crowd. His smile faded as he took in the scene. Sarah in her wedding dress, Mrs. Preston's cold stare, David looking increasingly uncomfortable. Is everything okay here? Carlos asked. Carlos. Mrs. Preston stepped forward. There seems to be some confusion about the guest list. This gentleman claims to be related to the bride, but... Related? Carlos looked genuinely confused. Ma'am, this is Mike Torres. He's not just related to anyone here. He's... I caught Carlos's eye and gave him a slight shake of the head. Not yet. Not like this. He's what? Mrs. Preston demanded. Carlos paused, reading my expression. He's Sarah's father. Of course he should be here. That's not the issue, David said. The issue is whether this is the appropriate venue for... Appropriate? Carlos's voice carried a tone I recognized. The same tone he used when someone questioned his authority at the venue. Sir, with respect, I think you might want to reconsider that statement. Sarah looked between Carlos and me, a frown creasing her forehead. Dad, how do you know the venue manager? Carlos and I go way back, I said simply. Way back how? I could see her mind working, trying to piece together information that didn't fit her narrative. Her father was supposed to be a simple construction worker, uneducated, powerless, someone who could be dismissed and forgotten. But here was the venue manager treating me with obvious respect. Not the polite respect you show to any guest, but the kind of respect reserved for people who matter. Mr. Torres taught me everything I know about construction, Carlos said carefully, about business, about treating people right. Mrs. Preston was getting impatient. This is all very touching, but we have a wedding to attend to. Security should handle this situation. Security? Carlos's eyebrows shot up. Ma'am, I am security. I'm also operations, management, and everything else that keeps this place running. And I can tell you right now, Mr. Torres is welcome here anytime he wants to be. That's not your decision to make, Mrs. Preston snapped. Carlos looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at me. I could see the question in his eyes. How much should I tell them? I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a contact. Jennifer Williams, my attorney. She specialized in contract law, had been on retainer for my company for 8 years. Harvard Law graduate, sharp as a blade, and completely loyal. Carlos, I said, is the Patterson room available? Of course, sir. Always. Good. I may need somewhere private to make a phone call. Sarah caught the exchange. Dad, what's going on? Why do you know so much about this place? I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, the little girl who used to ride on my shoulders at construction sites, who helped me measure lumber when she was 10 years old, who promised she'd never be ashamed of where she came from. Sarah, I said, there's a lot about your father you've forgotten. A lot about your father you never bothered to learn. Like what? Like who built this place? Mrs. Preston laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. Mr. Torres, this estate was designed by Harrison and Associates, one of the most prestigious architectural firms in New England. Designed, yes, but who laid the foundation? Who poured the concrete? Who managed the construction project from groundbreaking to ribbon cutting? Carlos cleared his throat. That would be Torres and Associates Construction, ma'am. Best in the business. The wheels were turning now. I could see it in Sarah's eyes, in David's uncomfortable shifting, in Mrs. Preston's sudden uncertainty. Dad, Sarah said slowly, are you saying you worked on this building? I'm saying a lot of things, mija. Question is whether you're ready to listen. That's when Mrs. Preston decided to escalate things to a level I don't think she was prepared for. Enough of this charade, she said, her voice carrying across the entrance area. Security! I need security here immediately. The effect was immediate. Conversations stopped throughout the crowd. Phones came out, people started recording. This wasn't just a family drama anymore. This was entertainment for Connecticut's elite. Sarah's face went red. Mother Preston, please. Don't Mother Preston me, dear. This man is disrupting your wedding day. David's wedding day. Our family's reputation is at stake. Two security guards appeared from inside the venue. Young guys, probably in their 20s, wearing black suits with earpieces. They approached us with the kind of cautious professionalism that suggested they'd broken up their share of rich people problems. "Ma'am," the taller one said to Mrs. Preston, "what seems to be the issue?" "This man," she pointed at me like I was a stray dog, "is trespassing. He's not on the guest list. He's causing a disturbance, and I want him removed from the property immediately." The security guard looked at me, then at Sarah, then at Carlos. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to come with us." And that's when Sarah delivered the words that I'll remember for the rest of my life. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and loud enough for everyone to hear. "Remove him. He doesn't belong here. He never belonged here. I don't want him at my wedding, and I don't want him in my life." The crowd gasped, literally gasped. Even for a group of people accustomed to family drama and social warfare, this was brutal. "Sarah," David said quietly, "maybe we should—" "No, David. This needs to be said. This man abandoned our family. He's an alcoholic, he's unreliable, and he spent my entire adult life trying to take credit for accomplishments that have nothing to do with him." Every word was a lie. Every single word. And she was saying it in front of 250 witnesses. "He claims he paid for my education, but the truth is I earned scholarships. I worked multiple jobs. I put myself through Columbia while he was off drinking away what little money he made laying concrete." The security guards looked uncomfortable. This wasn't what they'd signed up for. Mrs. Preston, however, looked satisfied. "You see, the girl knows her own father. Remove him." But the guards hesitated, looking at Carlos. He was their boss, after all. "Carlos," I said quietly, "do you have your master keys with you?" "Yes, sir." "Good. We're going to need them." Sarah caught the exchange. "Dad, stop this. Just leave. Just go back to your little world and leave me alone." "My little world?" "Yes. Your trucks, and your concrete, and your—" She gestured at my clothes. "Your pathetic attempts to be something you're not." That's when the crowd really started paying attention. Phones were definitely recording now. This was going to be on social media within the hour. "Sarah," I said, my voice calm as still water, "let me ask you something. What do you think this wedding cost?" "That's none of your business." $340,000, I said. "Venue rental, catering, flowers, band, photographer, $340,000. Mrs. Preston's eyes narrowed. "How could you possibly know that?" "Because I've seen the invoices. That's impossible. Those are private—" "The venue rental alone is $87,500, I continued, "paid in advance, or supposed to be paid in advance." David looked confused. "Mother, what is he talking about?" "He's talking nonsense," Mrs. Preston said, but I could see uncertainty creeping into her voice. "Am I, Mrs. Preston? Because I have some paperwork in my truck that suggests otherwise." The first security guard stepped forward. "Sir, I really need you to come with me now." But before he could reach me, his radio crackled to life. "All units, this is base. Stand down on the entrance situation. Stand down immediately." The guard looked confused. "Base, can you repeat?" "Stand down. Do not detain the individual in question. Repeat, do not detain." Carlos pulled out his own radio. "Base, this is Carlos. What's the situation?" "Carlos, we just got a call from the legal department. Apparently there's some kind of ownership issue that needs to be resolved before any action is taken." Mrs. Preston's face went white. "Ownership issue?" I smiled, the same cold smile from earlier. "Would you like to see the paperwork now, Mrs. Preston? Or would you prefer to keep making accusations about trespassing?" Sarah grabbed my arm. "Dad, what are you doing?" "What I should have done 8 months ago, teaching you about consequences." "Consequences for what?" "For lying, for stealing, for forgetting who raised you. I didn't steal anything." "Didn't you?" I pulled out my phone and scrolled to my text messages. 6 months ago. "Dad, emergency, car broke down, need $12,000 for repairs. Remember that?" Her face flushed. "That was $15,000 I sent you. 15,000, because that's what fathers do for daughters. Even daughters who are ashamed of them." I held up the phone so she could see the bank transfer confirmation. "Paid from Torres & Associates Construction to Sarah Torres, March 15th, 2024, $15,000. David stared at his fiancée. Sarah, you told me your car was a gift from your investment firm. It was, I mean, it's complicated. No, I said. It's not complicated at all. It's simple. Your daughter has been lying to you about everything. About me, about her past, about where her money comes from. Mrs. Preston was looking around frantically, trying to regain control of the situation. This is ridiculous. Carlos, I demand that you... Ma'am, Carlos said politely, I think it would be best if we move this conversation inside, away from the crowd. Because the crowd was definitely a crowd now. 250 people, all watching, all recording, all witnessing the spectacular collapse of Sarah Torres Preston's carefully constructed lie. No, Sarah said desperately. We're not going anywhere. This is my wedding day, and I want this man gone. That's when I decided it was time to show everyone exactly who they were dealing with. Carlos, I said, call Jennifer Williams. Tell her to bring the file. Which file, sir? All of them. 10 minutes later, a black BMW pulled up to the valet stand. Jennifer Williams stepped out. 42 years old, Harvard Law degree, $500 shoes, and a briefcase that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. She walked toward our group with the kind of confidence that comes from never losing a case. Mr. Torres, she said, extending her hand, I came as soon as Carlos called. The effect on the crowd was immediate. Here was a woman who clearly belonged in their world. Expensive clothes, perfect manners, obvious education, and she was treating me with the kind of deference you show to important clients. Mrs. Preston stepped forward. Excuse me, who are you? Jennifer Williams, senior partner at Williams, Davis & Associates. I handle Mr. Torres's legal affairs. Legal affairs? David asked. What kind of legal affairs does a construction worker need? Jennifer raised an eyebrow. Construction worker? I nodded toward Sarah. My daughter has been telling people I'm just a simple contractor, nothing more. Ah, Jennifer said, understanding immediately. Would you like me to clarify the situation? I think that would be helpful. Jennifer opened her briefcase and pulled out a manila folder. Official documents, court seals, property deeds, the kind of paperwork that makes lawyers rich and makes problems disappear. Ladies and gentlemen, she said, addressing the crowd like she was presenting to a jury, I'd like to clear up some misconceptions about my client, Michael Torres. Sarah looked panicked. This is unnecessary. Mr. Torres is the founder and majority owner of Torres & Associates Construction, a company that has completed over $200 million in projects throughout New England over the past 20 years. $200 million. I watched that number sink into the crowd, into Mrs. Preston's calculating brain, into David's confused expression, into Sarah's horrified realization. More specifically, Jennifer continued, Torres & Associates was the primary contractor for the construction of Harborview Estate, completed in 2019 at a cost of $15 million. She pulled out a document and held it up. This is the property deed, filed with Fairfield County in November 2019. Torres & Associates. Construction holds a 40% ownership stake in this facility. The silence was deafening. 250 people trying to process the fact that the embarrassing construction worker they'd been watching get humiliated actually owned nearly half of the venue they were standing in. Mrs. Preston found her voice first. That's impossible. I have the paperwork right here, Jennifer said calmly. Would you like to examine it? This changes nothing, Sarah said desperately. He's still... Still what? I asked quietly. Still not. Not good enough for your new family? Judge Patricia Davis stepped forward from the crowd. 60 years old, Connecticut Superior Court, probably the most respected person at this wedding after the bride and groom. She'd been watching silently, but now she had something to say. Mike Torres, she said, smiling. I thought I recognized you. Sarah looked confused. Judge Davis, you know my father? Know him? Sarah, your father has been one of Columbia University's most generous anonymous donors for the past 5 years. We've sat together at 3 different fundraising events. I watched Sarah's face crumble as that information hit home. Her father, the embarrassing construction worker, had been donating to her alma mater, had been sitting with judges and university presidents while she was telling everyone he was dead. $25,000 a year, Judge Davis continued, always anonymous, always specifically requested to go towards scholarships for first-generation college students. David stared at his fiancée. Sarah, you told us he abandoned you financially. He did. I mean, it's not. Jennifer pulled out another document. Perhaps this will clarify things. Bank statements for Torres and Associates Construction, showing monthly payments to Columbia University from September 2015 through May 2019. And she handed the papers to Mrs. Preston, who scanned them with increasing disbelief. $4,200 per month, Mrs. Preston read aloud, for 48 consecutive months. That's $200,000, David said quietly. $201,600, actually, I corrected. Plus books, housing, meal plans, and spring break trips to Europe that I didn't ask questions about. Sarah was crying now. Real tears, not the careful tears she'd learned to cry to get her way. Dad, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. You were embarrassed by where you came from. You wanted to fit in with people who judge worth by bank accounts and family names. So you erased me. Mrs. Preston was still staring at the bank statements. These payments, they're significant. Yes, they are, I said, but they're nothing compared to what your family owes my company. Jennifer smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. That brings us to the matter of the outstanding invoice. She pulled out another document. Official letterhead, past due stamps, legal notice warnings. Mrs. Preston, your family contracted Harborview Estate for this wedding on the assumption that the venue fees would be waived due to family connections. Is that correct? Well, yes, but... And did you verify this assumption with the venue management before making that commitment? Mrs. Preston looked at Carlos. Carlos, you said... Ma'am, Carlos said carefully, I said we'd be happy to host the event. I never said it would be complimentary. Jennifer held up the invoice. $87,500. For venue rental, setup, and exclusive use of the grounds. Due 14 days prior to the event. We paid that, Mrs. Preston said quickly. Actually, you didn't. Your check was returned for insufficient funds last Tuesday. The crowd gasped again. Insufficient funds. At a wedding for Connecticut's old money elite, the family couldn't cover their venue rental. David looked mortified. Mother, what is she talking about? It's a banking error, Mrs. Preston said weakly. A temporary cash flow issue. So, I said, my voice carrying across the silent crowd, let me see if I understand the situation correctly. You owe my company $87,500. You've publicly insulted me and demanded I be removed from property I partially own. And you've allowed my daughter to lie about her family history to cover up the fact that you couldn't afford this wedding without my daughter's money. My money, Sarah said. Where do you think your trust fund came from? The $15,000 I sent you 6 months ago? The money you've been spending on designer clothes and Manhattan rent? Did you think it magically appeared? Jennifer pulled out one final document. Mr. Torres established a trust fund for his daughter in 2020, seeded with $500,000 from his construction business profits. Miss Torres has been drawing from this account for the past 3 years. $500,000. The number hit the crowd like a physical force. You've been living off your father's money, Judge Davis said quietly, while telling everyone he abandoned you. Sarah looked around the crowd, at the phones recording her humiliation, at her fiancé's shocked expression, at her future mother-in-law's calculating reassessment of the situation. This isn't how this was supposed to go, she whispered. No, I said. This is exactly how it was supposed to go. This is what happens when you forget where you came from, when you choose lies over family, when you bite the hand that fed you for 28 years. Mrs. Preston cleared her throat. Perhaps we could discuss the financial arrangements privately. No, I said firmly. We've had enough private discussions. Everything is public now, just like you wanted. I turned to face the crowd, 250 of Connecticut's most powerful people, all watching, all recording, all waiting to see what would happen next. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, my voice carrying across the silent estate grounds, I want to thank you for witnessing this moment, because what happens next is going to be very simple, very legal, and very final. Jennifer opened her briefcase again and pulled out a thick document. Mrs. Preston, she said, this is a formal notice of contract default. As of this moment, Torres & Associates Construction is exercising its right to terminate the venue rental agreement due to non-payment. Mrs. Preston's face went white. You can't do that. The wedding is in 3 hours. Actually, we can, I said. Carlos? Carlos stepped forward, pulling a master key from his pocket. Ma'am, I'm sorry, but without payment, I have to secure the venue. All guests will need to leave the property within 30 minutes. The effect was immediate. Panic rippled through the crowd. $340,000 worth of wedding. Catering, flowers, band, photographer, about to be shut down. Wait, David said desperately. Wait, please, we can pay. We can transfer the money right now. Can you? Jennifer asked. Because according to our records, your family's check bounced due to insufficient funds. Do you have $87,500 available immediately? David pulled out his phone, frantically scrolling through his banking app. His face told the story before his words did. There's been a cash flow issue with the family accounts, but we can resolve it by Monday. Monday won't help you today, I said. That's when Sarah stepped forward, her wedding dress rustling in the suddenly cold Connecticut wind. Dad, please, don't do this. Don't do what? Don't ruin my wedding. Don't humiliate me like this. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. 28 years old, beautiful, educated, successful, and completely oblivious to the irony of what she'd just said. Humiliate you? Yes, in front of all these people. The way you humiliated me 20 minutes ago when you told them I abandoned our family? Her face crumpled. That's different. How is it different? Because what, Sarah? Because I'm just a construction worker and they're important people? Because my humiliation doesn't matter, but yours does? The crowd was absolutely silent. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was a reckoning. I have a proposition, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. A simple business proposition. Mrs. Preston looked hopeful. What kind of proposition? An apology, a public apology, from Sarah to me, in front of everyone here. That's it? David asked. That's not it. That's the beginning. Sarah apologizes for lying about her family. She tells everyone the truth about who paid for her education, who built her trust fund, who sent her $15,000 6 months ago when she needed help. Sarah looked around the crowd desperately. Dad, please. And then, I continued, she introduces me properly. Not as the embarrassing construction worker who doesn't belong here, as her father, the man who raised her, the man who sacrificed everything so she could have the opportunities she's had. And if she does this, Mrs. Preston asked, then the wedding continues. The invoice gets paid from Sarah's trust fund, money that came from my company anyway. Everyone goes home happy. And if she doesn't? Judge Davis asked quietly. I looked at Carlos. He nodded and pulled out his radio. Then the venue closes in 30 minutes. The caterers go home, the band packs up, and 250 people get to explain to their friends why the Preston Torres wedding was canceled, due to the bride's family dishonoring a construction worker. The silence stretched on. I could hear birds in the trees, traffic on the distant highway, the whispered conversations of people trying to process what they were witnessing. Sarah looked at her fiancé. David's expression was unreadable. Embarrassment, confusion, and maybe something that looked like respect for the man he'd underestimated. She looked at Mrs. Preston, who was calculating the social cost of a canceled wedding versus the cost of acknowledging she'd been wrong about everything. She looked at the crowd, many of whom were already posting to social media about the drama unfolding at Connecticut's most exclusive venue. Finally, she looked at me. Dad, she said quietly, if I do this, if I apologize, can we go back to the way things were? No, I said. We can't go back. Too much has been said. Too many lies have been told. But we can go forward, with honesty, with respect, with acknowledgement of what really happened here. She was crying again, real tears this time, not the manipulative kind. I'm scared, she whispered. Of what? Of what they'll think of me. I stepped closer to her, close enough that only she could hear what I said next. Mija, these people don't define your worth. Your mother and I raised you to be better than their approval. But somewhere along the way, you forgot that. You forgot that dignity comes from inside, not from outside. She nodded, wiping her eyes. Then she turned to face the crowd. My name is Sarah Torres Preston, she said, her voice shaking but clear, and I owe my father an apology. The crowd leaned in. 20 minutes ago, I told you that my father abandoned our family, that he was unreliable, alcoholic, and took credit for accomplishments that weren't his. All of that was a lie. Mrs. Preston shifted uncomfortably. The truth is that my father, Mike Torres, worked 3 jobs to put me through Columbia University. He paid $200,000 out of his own pocket. He built a trust fund for me with $500,000 from his construction business. 6 months ago, when I needed help, he sent me $15,000 without question. Her voice grew stronger. The truth is that my father owns 40% of this venue. He built this place. His company, Torres and Associates Construction, has completed over $200 million in projects throughout New England. She paused, looking directly at me. And the truth is that I was ashamed of him. Not because he did anything wrong, but because I was weak. Because I wanted to fit in with people who judge worth by bank accounts and family names instead of character and sacrifice. She took a deep breath. Dad, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for lying about you. I'm sorry for trying to erase you from my life. I'm sorry for choosing their approval over your love. The crowd was absolutely silent. And I want everyone here to know that I'm proud to be your daughter. Proud to be the daughter of a man who built something from nothing, who never forgot where he came from, and who taught me that dignity isn't about your tax bracket. It's about your character. I felt something I hadn't felt in 8 months. Not vindication, not victory. Peace. Apology accepted, I said. Then I turned to Carlos. The wedding proceeds as scheduled. Bill the venue rental to Sarah's trust fund. And just like that, it was over. Within 30 minutes, the story was everywhere. I watched it happen in real time. Phones that had been recording the confrontation uploaded videos to Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. By the time the wedding ceremony started an hour later, #TorresWedding was trending in Connecticut. The narrative was clear. Spoiled rich girl tries to erase her blue-collar father from her life. Gets publicly schooled when she discovers he owns the venue. The internet loves a good status reversal story, and this one had everything. Family drama, class warfare, financial manipulation, and a satisfying comeuppance. Mrs. Preston spent the ceremony looking like she'd swallowed something bitter. The Preston family's social standing took a hit they weren't going to recover from quickly. Word travels fast in elite circles, and the story of how they couldn't afford their own daughter-in-law's wedding was going to follow them for years. But the real consequences were more immediate and more personal. David Preston III spent the reception looking at his new wife like he'd never seen her before. During their first dance, I watched him lean in close and say something that made Sarah's face go pale. I couldn't hear the words, but I could guess the content. Trust. Honesty. The foundation of a marriage. They'd start their married life with secrets exposed and lies unraveled. That's not fatal to a relationship, but it's not exactly a fairy tale beginning either. Judge Davis approached me during the cocktail hour. "Mike," she said, "that was quite a display of restraint." Restraint? You could have shut down the wedding. You could have demanded payment in full before allowing anyone back on the property. You could have humiliated them the way they tried to humiliate you. That's not who I am. No, it's not. And that's why what you did was more powerful than revenge. You taught a lesson without becoming the villain. She was right. Revenge would have felt good for about 5 minutes. Justice feels good forever. Carlos found me later, near the end of the reception. "Boss," he said, "I want you to know I was ready to shut it down. Just say the word and I would have cleared the property." "I know." "Why didn't you?" "Because sometimes the point isn't to win. Sometimes the point is to teach." "What did you teach?" "That respect goes both ways. That family loyalty matters. That you can't build a life on lies without eventually paying the price." The financial consequences were immediate and concrete. Sarah's trust fund took an $87,500 hit for the venue rental. The Preston family had to liquidate some investments to cover the rest of the wedding costs. Mrs. Preston's bounce check became a matter of public record, which didn't help their reputation in Connecticut banking circles. But money was the least of it. 3 other parents approached me during the reception. Parents whose kids had also graduated from Columbia, who'd also made sacrifices to pay for their children's education. "I saw what happened earlier," said Robert Johnson, whose daughter was a surgeon in Boston. "My kid did something similar 2 years ago. Told her new boyfriend's family that I was a family friend instead of her father. Said it was easier than explaining that her dad was a plumber." "What did you do?" Nothing. I let it slide. Told myself it didn't matter. But watching you today, maybe I should have spoken up. That conversation happened 3 more times during the reception. Parents who'd been erased, minimized, or rewritten to fit their children's new social circles. Parents who'd sacrificed and been repaid with shame. The story resonated because it was universal. How many people have felt dismissed because of their accent, their clothes, their occupation? How many parents have watched their children climb social ladders by stepping on the people who built those ladders? By Sunday morning, the story had been picked up by local news. Connecticut construction worker schools, elite wedding guests in dignity and respect. And the coverage was surprisingly sympathetic, focusing on the themes of family loyalty and earned versus inherited wealth. Torres and Associates Construction got more business inquiries in 3 days than we usually get in 3 months. Apparently, a lot of people wanted to hire the contractor who'd stood up to Connecticut's elite. Sarah called me on Tuesday. "Dad," she said, "I need to ask you something." "What's that? Are you going to forgive me?" "I already did. I mean, really forgive me. Not just say the words." I thought about that for a while. "Sarah, forgiveness isn't about forgetting what happened. It's about choosing not to let what happened define our relationship going forward." "So what does that mean for us?" "It means we start over, with honesty this time, with respect for who we both are, not who we think the other person should be. And if I mess up again, then you mess up again. But you don't get to erase me. You don't get to rewrite history. You don't get to choose shame over family." She was quiet for a long time. "Dad, I want you to know something. Standing there at the wedding, watching you handle all of that with such dignity. I was proud of you. For the first time in months, I remembered why I used to be proud to be your daughter." "You should always be proud of who you are, mija. All of who you are, including where you came from." "Even if where I came from is a construction site?" "Especially if where you came from is a construction site. That's where real things get built, not just buildings. Character, values, the foundation that everything else stands on." The wedding was just the beginning. The real work, rebuilding our relationship, establishing new boundaries, learning to respect each other as adults, that would take time. But we had time. And for the first time in 8 months, we both wanted to use it. 3 months later, Sarah invited me to Sunday dinner at her apartment in Manhattan. It was the first time I'd been there since before her engagement. The place looked different somehow, less like a museum showcase and more like a home. Family photos were back on the mantel, including one of her mother and me from our wedding day 29 years ago. "Dad," she said as we sat down to eat, "I want to tell you about some changes I've made." "What kind of changes?" "Work changes, life changes, priority changes." She'd left her investment firm job, the pressure, the culture, the constant need to project an image that wasn't really her. It had become unbearable after the wedding. "What are you doing now?" "I'm working for a nonprofit, housing development for low-income families, using my finance background to help people who need it, instead of helping rich people get richer." I smiled. "Your mother would be proud." "You think so?" "I know so. She always said you had a good heart. She was just waiting for you to remember how to use it." As Sarah had also started volunteering at a Columbia mentorship program for first-generation college students. Kids from families like ours whose parents worked with their hands and spoke with accents and didn't always know how to navigate the world their children were entering. "I tell them about you," she said, "about what you sacrificed, about how I lost my way for a while but found it again." "And what do you tell them to do when they feel ashamed of where they came from?" "I tell them that where you come from isn't something to overcome. It's something to honor. It's your foundation, and you can't build anything lasting without a strong foundation." We talked about her marriage. David had struggled with the revelations from the wedding day, but not in the way I'd expected. His struggle wasn't with learning that his wife came from a working-class family. His struggle was with learning that his wife was capable of lies that comprehensive and that sustained. "We're in counseling," Sarah said, "working through trust issues. It's hard, but it's good. We're learning to be honest with each other about everything, even the uncomfortable stuff." "That's what marriage is," I said, "choosing to keep showing up even when it's hard." She asked about the business. Torres and Associates had grown significantly since the wedding. not just because of the publicity, but because the story had reminded people that there's value in dealing with contractors who prioritize integrity over profit margins. Carlos had been promoted to full partner. We'd hired 12 new employees and taken on 3 major projects, including a hospital expansion in Hartford. Dad, can I ask you something? Of course. That day at the wedding when you had me cornered and could have destroyed everything, why didn't you? I thought about that question. I'd been thinking about it for 3 months. Because destroying you wouldn't have fixed anything. It would have felt good for a few minutes. But then what? You'd still be my daughter. I'd still love you. And we'd still have to figure out how to move forward. So what was the point? The point was to remind you, and everyone watching, that dignity isn't something you can buy or inherit. It's something you earn through your choices. And respect isn't something you can demand. It's something you give and receive. She nodded, understanding. I want you to know, she said, that I tell everyone about you now. At work, at social events, everywhere. I tell them about the construction worker who built a business empire, the immigrant who put his daughter through Columbia, the man who taught me that your worth isn't measured by your bank account. And what do they say? They say they wish they had a father like mine. We finished dinner as the sun set over Manhattan. Before I left, Sarah walked me to the door. Dad, I love you, and I'm proud to be your daughter. I love you too, Mija. Always have, always will. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. Sometimes it's just refusing to let other people's shame become your own. If you enjoyed this story, please let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about standing up for yourself and never forgetting where you came from.